I'm going to try in 15 minutes to cover a whole lot of material, so you might find me talking faster and faster and faster. But I wanted to start off with just an observation that artificial intelligence has grown in astounding leaps and bounds since my days as a postdoc in Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University, and talking to people about how exciting it was that in incredibly explicit ways we could watch a machine as it learns about the world. And a couple of things have happened that have changed these little toy models that just took advantage of insights about neural processing and how neurons talk to each other and how neurons learn about the world, and have exploded mostly through a combination of a couple of key insights that were pioneered by Jeff Hinton and others, by taking massive parallel layers of feature maps that can convolve in order to discover what features of the world are actually useful for solving a particular problem, and then combining those with pooled maps that allow us to see how is it that we can usefully combine features to learn about the world. And combine those with fully interconnected layers, which allow us to make incredibly precise and generalizable categorizations that are incredibly flexible. These combined features, when taken to larger and larger sets of units and more computational power and more learning experiences, produce two ideas that, to me, are incredibly exciting about this area. So one is that this sort of learning system has an emergent sensitivity to computational hierarchies of learned features, which, in a sense, gives us some insights about how we learn about structure in the natural world and how a child learns about useful structure in the natural world. Secondly, and really excitingly, it's actually kind of a miracle almost, that this sort of computer learning, which grew out of these toy models and then exploded into something that was just designed to do a task really well with crushing computational power, has started to reveal deep parallels to human brain organization. So Kadu and colleagues have this beautiful demonstration about how if you go into a primate's brain in infratemporal cortex, the region of the brain which is like the hidden layer between perception and action when it comes to objects and similarity of object recognition in the world, if you train a convoluted network, deep learning network, on the same set of objects that the primate was exposed to and the same sort of training environments, they produce hidden layers that are remarkably similar in their function to the hidden layers that are actually in the human primate brain. This emergent property is sort of a remarkable act of what E.O. Wilson would call consilience. Two very disparate areas of science learning to dance together around principles that are deep, exciting, and generative. Now, most of you are familiar with this deep learning models and all of the amazing tricks it can do, as well as its limitations. By expanding this dance between human brain research and deep learning and AI, there have been remarkable strides forward. By taking deep insights from how neural networks work at the systems level to obtain function, from Michael Posner's spotlight of attention to salient maps to Jeff Ellman's recurrent neural networks, these simple learning tools are able to do remarkable things by taking a picture it's never seen before and putting forth a sentence. A woman is throwing a frisbee in a park, and if you freeze frame, what is the model doing in its salience maps at the very moment that it utters the word frisbee, you see something like this, Mike Posner's spotlight of attention, highlighting the salience of a particular discovered feature in the world, regardless of where it appears in the visual scene, as well as some kind of embarrassing mistakes, like a little girl is sitting on a bed with a teddy bear. That's clearly not a bed, or not a bed I've ever seen, but semantically similar, which gives us some insight into the semantic relationships, the sense that it's making of the world. I believe that this is giving us deep insights, not into just how computers can do incredible things that could make us a lot of money, but deep insights into how children's minds and brains are making sense of the world and being tuned to pull out relevant features, combinations of relevant features that it can use flexibly to engage in goal-directed action. Today's talk, and today's entire symposium, as I understand it, is to really understand how is this dance between AI and learning science research potentially going to give rise to innovations within complex learning environments. We're not just talking about a primate looking at a bunch of pictures and being able to react to them and make decisions about them, but we're talking about the most complex entity in the entire known universe, which is not the interconnected human adult brain, but the interconnected child's brain. So there was a wonderful introduction in which we talked about ecosystems, and I think that this is a really great and productive and generative theme for today's talk, because I think that this connection for AI and education is going to play out across multiple layered ecosystem, and I believe that this creates a learning environment in which all of these different levels of the ecosystem might interact. So I'm very interested in interacting with school districts that are interested in assessing and predicting challenges that kids might face in the future based on everything that we know about them right now. I'm also very interested in interacting with practitioners that are interested in differentiating the learning experiences of a child so that they can optimize their emerging mind and their emerging computational powers. I'm also interested in interacting with ed tech developers because I believe that the very nature of how we as a culture scaffold our learning experiences to optimize learning is changing dramatically as these technologies become more pervasive. I believe that the technological ecosystem that my 3-year-old son is growing up in is radically different from the one that I grew up in. And I stagger to think about what the implications are for that developing mind. I also think that, most importantly, this is not simply an actuarial science where we're going to get 2% or 3% better at what we do every single year. But I think there's going to be a deep and satisfying dialogue between the learning sciences, both applying and refining their insights, moving learning science ahead by leaps and bounds as we engage in this ecosystem. And then finally, where I spend most of my time, is in neuroscience. So understanding this deep question about how do educational experiences rewire brain circuitry to allow new computational powers that are culturally endowed through education. So that's a lot to cover in 15 minutes, and I only have 7.5 left. But let me just summarize by famous first player in this field, Andrew, who recently said in an MIT technology interview, deep learning will play a role in remaking the educational system. It's pretty clear it will, actually. So he's putting his, I like this, putting his foot down, very clear, bold statement, putting his money down, actually. But he makes a very clear and important insight, I think. Because he thinks that there's 2 waves of transformation, and he thinks that he's seen this in multiple industries, but it hasn't quite happened yet in education. The first one is the shift, the IT transformation. So education is becoming more and more technologically infused, which is going to lead to the precursors of the AI transformation. So what do we see right now in terms of major shifts in what we call education and educational institutions? I think one shift really is this IT revolution, or transformation we might call it. We're now entering the age of what we might consider big data in education, where very advanced data analytics can take what used to be a completely balkanized system of paper and pencil tests, which rarely get aggregated to a large level. No offense to people who live in the Balkans, it's a very fine way to organize systems. But Sean Reardon, as many of you know, has pulled out sort of a magic trick of data analytics in order to take all of this data and for the first time be able to see nationwide what every single school district in the country is doing as a snapshot as a result of their 6th graders pulling off what is one of the most amazing cultural achievements in human brain plasticity, which is rewiring the human brain so that language and vision can be integrated to produce fluent reading. There are huge individual differences in how well each of these school districts, which are weighted by size here, are doing on this task compared to the national averages. And the staggering and urgent implication of this is that we're not doing very well in terms of equally distributing these resources, which are crucial for supporting this transformation. Another technological revolution and another great affordance is that this experiment that we do in 6th grade, where we discover that a lot of children might have severe difficulties and challenges that we might give them an IEP for in dyslexia, are actually recurring year after year after year in every single cohort. This is a repeated cohort system, which is the ideal condition for creating a system which can learn from one cohort to the next. And when I interview most heads of school districts and I ask you, well, what have you done this year that has taken significant advantage of what you learned about your students last year? They say, that's one of the least priorities that I have. You're talking about a future that doesn't quite exist yet. But we're working on a partnership with San Francisco Unified School District in which we're actually taking children who are scoring in this very low range and doing a historic retrospective analysis of all of the data that was collected of them when they first entered kindergarten. And we're iterating this again and again and again throughout each cohort in order to create better predictive models. I also think this is going to have a tremendous impact on the technology of brain imaging. We're now able to examine in a pre-reading child the organization of brain circuits that allow them to navigate the world of speech and allow them to navigate the world of visual objects, and actually image them as they go through the transformation of going to school and through hundreds and thousands of learning episodes that are structured by schooling, create an integrated circuit that supports skilled reading. This is a very interesting challenge that has deep parallels to deep learning in terms of finding features that are relevant and finding relevant ways of connecting them for goal-directed behavior. So as we dive into the neuroscience of the hierarchical layers of the brain that are crucially involved in representing visual word forms and passing them through weighted, connected, pooled, hierarchical relationships in the brain that allow us to connect these orthographic features to the sound system of language, we're able to examine changes that occur within particular neural networks of the brain, and we're able to link these through backpropagation experiments to AI experiments that examine much the same process in which we can take a toy model with just a couple of hundred units structured in a particular way that's very brain-like and train this model to learn to pronounce 3,000 monosyllabic words in English over the course of about 4 million trials with simple backpropagation. Now, this little toy feat is, in a sense, kind of trivial, but I believe it produces a really great analytic engine to dive into what some of the biggest insights about educational cognitive neuroscience, how brains might differ, and how educational systems might adapt to those differences when it comes to profound challenges in reading. We've known for decades that a child's phonological abilities, their ability to parse and play with the combinatorial structure of spoken words, is a crucial precursor for reading success and is highly predictive of how well children will do on standardized reading tests, accounting for sometimes as much as 50% of the variance. We also know that variations in these skills significantly predict brain activity in this integrated brain circuit that's crucial for reading. We can then use these models to do amazing things. We can start to probe the process of learning that occurs as the model goes from being a pre-reader to a reader under different conditions in order to investigate individual differences. We can theoretically produce a model that realistically mimics every single child in every single school system by understanding the precursors of the neural networks that they have for orthographic and visual processing and how it's combined with speech processing. Mike Harm, Mark Seidenberg, and I had been collaborating for a long time on actually simulating differences for children who might have subtle biological impairments in phonology or sociological impairments in phonology due to limited access to language, and have simulated, over the course of the development of these models, most of the symptoms of developmental dyslexia, where the model fails at learning novel words. Most remarkably, we can go inside these hidden layers and start to examine the similarity structure as the model learns about the world. And I want to just give you a flavor of this in my last minute or so. about how over the course of 4 million trials, a model with typical phonological structure learns to cluster words like beat and heat and feet, and a novel word it's never seen before, geet, all together tightly, and discriminate them from other words pronounced differently like great and threat. And contrast that with an atypical phonological network that simulates what children with profound difficulties in phonology do, which is to produce something much more like a lookup table, where they have a unique solution for every single word that they've used, that they've learned, and very poor abilities to generalize to novel words. And we can study this in the context of what happens when we use artificial intelligent guided tutoring to adapt to each child's needs, to work with a tutor to help remediate these problems and focus them on the combinatorial structure of visual word forms and how they map to speech, which in the field produces quite dramatic results in field studies in New York City and public schools in Pittsburgh. And we can also demonstrate that given the model, that same exact training, we see a network which looks very much like the typical network, which underscores the point that if we can adapt the learning environment to the starting and continuing needs of a child, we could produce remarkable results. So I just want to end with this focus on the IT transformations that are happening in education can go hand in hand with the AI transformations that are happening in order to bolster the learning science insights and the productivity of these insights for education. I want to highlight one particular rapid change which is occurring in the IT transformation. Partly in the APAC market, $7.5 billion for K-12 online tutoring, which is happening by these leading companies, as pointed out by this recent article in Reuters. 5-year projected growth of 15.57 CAGR, so every single year. This growth is predicted for the next 5 years for what might be close to 500 million children. One of the reasons why this particular change in educational technology is, I think, crucial for this particular area is because it's all of the interactions between a tutor, the material, and a student are technologically mediated with a digital record that captures every single moment of the teaching and the learning, which provides an incredible opportunity to start to examine learner differences in spoken words, in volleys of play between them, in engagement with particular material, and as has been demonstrated by Whitehill and others, a deep learning neural network model trained only with the input of a student's face can successfully predict the student's experience moment by moment, second by second in time of their experiences of content difficulty, providing a real-time feedback signal to the tutor. In the case of English as a second language, we're also getting audio signals which can be used to train deep network models of speech, which can be used to do vector analysis of the particular pressure points that a student might be experiencing, guiding the tutor in order to provide scaffolding to draw attention, to draw the salience maps to the parts that might be most relevant for that student at that time in that moment. I think we're witnessing the precursors of an incredible synergy between innovations in learning environments, such as the one we just talked about, and the integrated actions between AI, not just as a brute force mechanism for extracting valuable and profitable data, but for interacting with learning science research to provide principles of effective learning that can be exploited. But these learning sciences, it's an evolving field. And I believe we're going to learn an entirely new lexicon, an entirely new syntax, and an entirely new set of insights by interacting at this higher level. And I believe that's the end of my time. Thank you very much.